So I'm not going to talk long because the guys you want to talk to are much smarter than me. They're going to be sitting behind me here in a second. But I want to give you just a real brief history of motion reality so you can figure out from whence what you saw behind you came. We were formed in 1984. So we're about 33 years old. In 2001, we incorporated as motion reality. We cut our teeth in doing traditional motion capture for feature films and for games. We had a big deal with Acclaim Entertainment, did all their motion capture back when they were a big player in console games. But what our boss, my boss, wanted to do was get into tetherless, real-time mocap and get into the VR world. And that's what hopefully many of you were watching earlier this evening. And that's what these guys are going to talk about where we're going next. But to get to where we are, you need to know how we got where we are before we can tell you where we're going. And that is my boss, the chief executive officer and the chairman of the board, Dr. Tom McLaughlin, is a PhD in biomechanical engineering. And he came up with 3 factors for truly comfortable, and that's important, truly comfortable, immersive, tetherless virtual reality. And he came up with 3 factors. The first is the avatar that represents you in game must be the same dimensions as you are in real life. And so before we put you in the system, we will scale you. We'll get your arm length from shoulder to elbow, elbow to wrist, both arms, the same thing, hip to knee to ankle. We'll get your height. And that makes it it truly improves the experience when you're in the system, so that when you reach out, your brain knows where your hand is, whether it can see it or not. It better be where your brain thinks it is. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, unlike a lot of the VR that's currently going on, we do full body representation. If you look down for me, you'll see a big fat belly. But for most of the guys that work for me, you'll see the fit bodies of them. They'll be tall, they'll be short, but they look like themselves. And it's so accurate in their shape and their movement that when Evan Bernal, who's been out here demonstrating for you, or Tanner is in the system, you know it's them, even if they're skinned as a female police officer, just the way they walk. You can tell by their gait. Really good way of identifying who they are. And the final thing is tetherless. We got to let you walk naturally, run naturally, hop, skip, and jump naturally. If you can't move in a natural fashion, then you won't feel comfortable in there. So those are the 3 big factors. You're going to be scaled to the proper size, you're going to be untethered, and you're going to be represented from head to toe. When you look down, there you are. So with that, I'm going to introduce the smart guys that are some of the smart guys. We're only about 36 strong, and everything you see in here is made in-house. We don't sub out yet, but as orders starting to come in, we're starting to look for subcontractors. And they're still not here, so they're in virtual reality. Oh, there we go. Okay, so first is Mr. Travis Hamrick. Come on in, Travis. Travis leads our tracking team. There's a lot of, we've got 3 basic servers. I won't go into that, but the server that does all the motion capture tracking, his team does all the software development for it. Thank you, Travis. You're going to sit right there. Now, Dr. Ronnie Wilmink. Ronnie leads our R&D team. Ronnie is our R&D team. He is the only R&D'er, but he works with the rest of the team, and he gets the new equipment in, he evaluates it, and tells us what we need to go look at next. Thank you, Ronnie. Yep. Mr. John Nason. John, within the past year, became a U.S. citizen. He's normally a Brit, but now he's an American. But he's both, he claims. But more importantly, he heads our sports. We are focused right now on law enforcement and military. We're branching out at interactive entertainment, but we have been a long-time partner in the sports market. We've worked with the Packers in the past, Green Bay, not the Falcons, sorry. We've worked with the San Francisco Giants in the past, not the Braves, sorry. But we are currently working still in depth with TaylorMade Adidas and their golf fitting, and there's more sports stuff forthcoming, so John's here to talk about that. And finally, the guy that really pushed me to allow this to happen, he was kicking me every day, Mr. Shaun Sheppard. Shaun heads up our game development team. And again, we are a small company, about 36 people strong. He heads up a game development team of 3. But they do fantastic work. We also have our lead artist here. We have some other biomechanical engineers, if you have questions later, that can answer them as we see fit. So with that, I'll leave it over to the smart guys. Thanks.
Yeah, so the format of this is we're just going to spend 3 to 5 minutes or a little bit more, however long it takes for each one of us, cycle through. Once we get to the end, we'll open up for some questions and responses. So with that, Travis, come kick us off.
All right, so the first thing we wanted to do is just kind of tell you a little bit about my team and what we're doing, and then kind of tell you where we see the future of VR and why we're kind of headed the way that we are. My team was responsible for basically taking 20 or 30 years of traditional motion capture, taking those engines, taking those philosophies and thoughts, and we just, from the ground up, just rewrote the whole thing to handle VR. And we had 3 main priorities. A lot of these are repeats of what Mark just said. We focused a lot on tetherless participation. We want to just make sure that people could get in, people could experience the world that they're in, and not really be having to deal with connections with the real world, because that ruins your sense of immersion. It ruins your chance to work in groups. It ruins your chance to really just to be immersed without having to, the cords getting wrapped around your necks or being stuck in front of a machine and that kind of thing. So we worked on that as much as we could. And the next one is just latency. From tracking a photon as it hits as you make a movement, to the time that it goes through a tracking system, then goes over a tetherless communications protocol, to a rendering system, and finally onto your screen, all has to happen fast enough that you don't even realize that it's going on. And that's a very difficult thing to do, and it's even more difficult if you're using all off-the-shelf products that didn't have those capabilities in mind. So we had to go from the ground up, worrying about that thing. We write our own camera code all the way to writing our own protocols just to make sure that that works. And then the last thing we were really wanting to make sure that we do is write the thing in a new way that works with modern game engines. 30 years ago when we first started writing motion capture, there were hardly any game engines at all out there. So we had 30 years worth of legacy code, a lot of changes along the way, and trying to make things work for a game, trying to make things work in this environment where you're not just trying to shoehorn someone else's tech into the game that you're trying to make. We want it to be just a first level protocol. And so we've done that, and this is the result, is Dauntless. It's a large scale, large group system that works with a dozen or so people in a room the size of a gym. And so where do we see the future? 4 areas. We see groups of people. We think people are social beings and they like to do things together. The hard part about a lot of the current VR systems is you can only do like 1 or 2 people, and so you're really by yourself. Well, by yourself is fun when you can't be with a group, but people are generally social people, so being able to go and do things in a experience something together, solve a puzzle together, fight the bad guys together is a lot more fun than doing it by yourself. The next thing that we really wanted that we see VR going is larger and larger areas. When you're confined to a room, when you're confined in front of your machine, even with the current tech that does a good job of letting you know that your coffee table is really close to your shin, you're still always worried about your coffee table being close to your shin when you're playing in a console game. So being in a large space where you don't have to do as many tricks to go from one place to another, where you can roam freely for a long time before you have to do some kind of a manipulation in order to when your virtual world might be bigger than your physical space. If you can minimize that as much as possible, then the experience is a lot more immersive and a lot more real, and you have a lot less chance of getting confused or sick or those kind of things that we struggle with in VR. The next thing we really want to focus on, and where we think VR is going, is increased realism. the thing that we've noticed doing this is that when your body is proportionate, like when you clap your hands and your hands actually touch each other, when your physical hands touch each other, when you're working in a group and you can reach out and touch a virtual avatar's shoulder and you actually touch the real shoulder of your real friend, when you're walking around and your footsteps and your velocity match your actual pace, it's a lot less likely that you're going to get disoriented. You're a lot less likely that you're going to get sick. A lot of the issues that you have in the console system is different when you actually are able to expand out and work in a more natural environment. And part of that is we make sure that we scale you correctly so that when you do reach out and touch a weapon, or you do reach out and touch the shoulder of a person, that your virtual hand touches the real shoulder, at the right time, and the experience is a lot better because of that. And the last thing that I think that we think is a future of VR is more intuitive controls. Joysticks, pushing buttons, having to manipulate a computer interface in order to move or in order to interact with your environment is where your suspension of disbelief stops. Out here, you can walk. If you want to kick something, you just kick it. If you want to shoot somebody, you just pull the trigger. If you want to open the door, we kind of have it where you can put your hand on the door and it kind of opens. So when you're having to remember the joystick controls, what does button B do in this situation? What does button A do? Those are things that cause you to have to kind of live in this world in between reality and the virtual world that it causes the immersion to not be as realistic as possible. So that's what our team has been striving to do. That's the directions that we're trying to go in the future, and that's how we're trying to expand our current product. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Wilmink, and he's going to discuss some hardware considerations.
Thank you, Travis. Can everybody hear me? All right. So yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about hardware considerations. As you've seen from our guys demonstrating the system earlier, we've built a lot of our equipment here ourselves. It's built in-house. Why? Most of it is not because I like building stuff. I do, but I like building stuff. But we don't just build stuff for the heck of it. We build it to increase the realism of the system when you're participating in it. And so we do, part of our major core business is training law enforcement and military. They want the realism. The more real, the better the training becomes. And that's an experience that they take home and they take to heart. It's very hard to train basic maneuvers like clearing a room, going through a building, from behind a desktop in a joystick or mouse, which the military has done before, and I think they still do to a certain extent. So same goes true for the entertainment systems. The more real it is, the more fun you have. As Travis said, when you're touching the guy in front of you, it becomes real. It sort of elevates the experience beyond just a VR experience. You're actually interacting. And that's really what we're trying to do here. So with realism being the goal, how do we achieve that? And so there's a lot of equipment that we need to build. Albert Einstein said it, necessity is the mother of all invention. And so that's sort of why we build stuff in-house. If it's available outside off the shelf, we'll just buy it. It would be silly to just build it for the heck of building it. So going back a little ways, so we started, one of the first things we built is our own cameras. This is a 2,400 square foot volume. We have about 60 or so cameras in here. The 5,000 square foot volume back there, we have 152 cameras in there. And that is to cover the space so that if you have multiple people in there, you can track them all. And then Travis and his team, they take care of all the output that the camera generates. But these cameras were not available when we started motion capture back in the days. So yes, there are a couple of motion capture companies around, and they build great equipment, but that is not exactly what we needed. So we decided that we need to build our own. So with our own hardware, we also control a lot more of the pipeline, and we know where our latency goes. Latency is a big player in realism. The more latency you add, the more unreal and the more distance you get from the experience, to the point that we actually get sick in virtual reality, and I'm sure you're all aware of that. So we built our own cameras, mostly to deal with the latency, and we started off in sports, so we needed high-speed captures. 240 hertz is what these cameras will be able to do, and that actually really helps us, even though right now we're running most of the systems at 60 hertz. The speed of the camera built into it still helps a lot in terms of keeping the latency at a controllable level. The man-wearable computers, the pack that you wear on your back, we've built our own. Again, nothing was available off the shelf. We started off with laptops, and we started saying that's not powerful enough, we need more graphics power. So we started to end up with the most powerful laptop you can find, shove it in a backpack, still not good enough. So then we went to a desktop computer, put a desktop graphics card in there, and then we handed it over to the software guys, the art team, and the game engine guys. And now it's like, here you have a backpack that can do more of what you want it to do, but it's battery powered because we want to be tetherless. It's one of our main goals. And so we're building our own man wearable in order to be able to provide the experience of tetherless motion capture. HMDs, we need to drive an HMD. We started off with HMDs that would only do 30, 40 degree field of view. That's nothing, and it really doesn't give you a good experience, but that was all that was available at the time. So we've been starting looking, and luckily Oculus came around the corner and started developing their HMDs with 90, 100 degree field of view. But then we ended up with licensing issues. We couldn't just buy one and resell it. Same, then Vive came along. Great HMD, but they're also tied different ways. They're tied to Steam. So they do now make available development kits that you can actually build content for and actually resell them. So we ended up with OSVR, mostly because it was an open platform and it was available. We got drawings from them, so we could add markers to them. Obviously, we need to track your head movement really accurately in order to give you that realistic experience. So they gave us the drawings. All the CAD files are available, so we can add markers where we need them to. Also, their drivers are open source, so if things are not quite up to snuff, we can actually jump in and help out and write our own software for this particular hardware. Also, one of the big deals with that realism is accurate physical implements. As Travis said, you can't get an experience of shooting a rifle if you hold a joystick. So we need to build rifles. We need to build pistols. Our main client was military. So they want weapons that feel like the weapons that they use in everyday life. So we fielded questions from several of our clients. Can we just use our regular weapons? No, because there's a lot of issues with bringing live ammunition and live weapons into a system like this. And so there, even though it's available, it's not really practical. So again, we build our own. So we ended up using airsoft weapons, gut them completely, and add our own electronics so that they actually marry with the optical motion capture system. All the weapons nowadays in our system are radio controlled, so all the switches that are on the weapons, they do have a corresponding radio signal that gets into the tracking system. So if you switch your weapon from off of safe from single shot or multiple shots, each of those activations of a switch gets a radio signal that then we can use in our system. All of that leads to realism. The weapons, they run out of ammunition. So we can program the weapon to say, okay, this is an M4, standard M4, 30 rounds magazine. And so after you fire 30 rounds out of your magazine, the magazine's empty. And so you need to remove the magazine, put a new one in, and then you're back in battle. And so those are the things that our military clients really are looking for, but also it adds to the realism, whether it's military or entertainment. And so lastly, to our man-wearable computers, we've added muscle stim. Muscle stim really, actually, it's a small board, and it's a small bit of electronics, but it really adds to the realism. The soldiers, when they walk out there, and they're used to your standard screen shooter or what have you in terms of simulator, they don't get shot. They're basically, it displays on the screen, you're dead. Okay, revive me and go back in battle. Here, when you get shot, you actually get shocked. And
Optionally.
no.
Tonight, don't worry. We decided, we can talk more about that later.
Yes.
Just to
But-
ease any tension.
But the first time when even big guys from the FBI or whatever they are that are used to operating under stress, it really adds to the stress. Once they get shot, they're like, whoa, what just happened? And it really brings back the realism. It pulls you into the game, and that's what we're all about. Thank you.
I feel like a bit of a fish out of water here because these guys are the smart guys and I'm just the guy who manages
Come on,
sports.
John.
But having said that, I put slides up. It makes it easier for me to talk. So I am sports operations manager. I do manage a number of clients who are motion capture clients, mainly TaylorMade Adidas. We've worked with the San Francisco Giants with pitching and hitting. We did work with some football. Actually, Mark, we did work with the Atlanta Falcons a long, long time ago before you started. So we had a little bit of local flavor. But basically, Shaun asked me to talk a little bit about what's going on in the application in sports, the sports industry for VR and even AR too. But gamification, that's kind of what's going on. People are beginning to look at sports and say, how do I get an experience in virtual reality that then I can apply to sports? So if you go to the next slide for me, this slide basically breaks it down. The way I look at it is content on one side and an application on the other. And we see people, video content, 360-degree video, digital content, graphically generated. And then the engagement side, we're looking at, hey, I want to sit at midcourt in a basketball game, or further down the line, I'm playing a game in a virtual baseball game. So these are kind of the four areas which VR is kind of, and even AR as well, is now getting into in the sports area. So if you go to the next slide, click through one more. So this is a couple in the performance video. Striver is a company that has actually made some good headway, particularly in football initially, but now they're looking at basketball, NHL. They've actually moved into industry training too, where they're using virtual reality video to be able to train quarterbacks to make better decisions. BAE Systems did the same thing for Team GB before the Rio Olympics. They actually put some of the athletes from cycling and canoe slalom, triathlon into some of the courses that they were going to experience out at the Olympics, so they had like a preview effectively before they got there. If we move across performance in the digital world, go ahead. So this is a soccer game that got digitized, and if you move forward, the company that does that's called Beyond Sports. They're based in Holland. Ronnie. And go ahead. Eon Sports. So what they've done, Beyond Sports. What they've done is they've gone ahead and digitized actual soccer games, and then be able to play that back so someone can virtually step into an area of the field maybe they weren't in before. They're learning how to see what was this player seeing that I wasn't. So they can actually use a digital version of the game where they can get inside and actually learn some of the tactics, some of the information the coach is trying to get across to them that maybe they wouldn't have experienced otherwise with video or being actually in the game playing. Move down to engagement. In the video side of things, the NBA is taking advantage of this. They kind of want to put you at a sporting event. So if you click through, Next VR is a big player in this. They started I think, with NBA, but they've gone on to the NFL. They've done tennis before, but they're really trying to sell an experience for a fan so they can get into the sports environment that maybe they can't afford courtside seats. They want to sit there. They can't afford to be in Germany watching a game, but they can be here watching the same game. Vogue VR, the same thing. They've done it with golf, where they put you on an 18th green somewhere at the end of a tournament so you can experience the excitement of being there. And then finally, on the digital side, on engagement, this is a guy who was swinging in a virtual reality batting cage at the Red Sox recently. Click through. The company there, they created a batting cage effectively so you can get in there. They used a Vive as their equipment so they could get in. They measured, hey, you hit the ball, hey, it's a home run, you got the experience, the crowd would cheer, and then you get to hit another one, and if it came close, you get the oohs and ahs. So that was one thing. Visual is another company that did it with hockey. They gave you a stick that you could actually defend virtual shots coming at you. They put it at a hockey experience before a game. So those are the kind of people that are currently involved. There's many more, but these are some of the prominent ones that I was able to look into. So if you move forward one more, some of the stuff that we've done, it was mentioned briefly. We did start with golf. We worked with a fitting system where we actually took data from our motion capture system. TaylorMade took that information and actually fit golf clubs. But out of that, we kind of got into it, and Ronnie alluded to the initial virtual reality headset we used. But I imagine it was very small and very little, but we used it for some football applications and some golf applications, both in the digital world, which was our domain, but one for performance and one for like a more fan engagement, more personal experience. So if you click through, what I've got is a couple of videos. We'll go to the football one first. This is something we did 2008, I believe. We were able to get involved with Madden. They were able to put our motion capture and sync it with the play. You can see he's got a full bodysuit on. He actually has a little haptic menu, interactive collision menu. He puts his hand up and the play appears in his virtual world. He's able to see the play, be able to memorize what he's supposed to be doing, check the routes, and then he's able to start the play with a slap of the ball, another collision detection. Although we're doing full motion capture on this, you only see the ball here. He makes a decision. We track the ball. He makes the throw. The play is over. We go to the next play. They start dialing down. Let's pick in the next play. So he's able to go through a number of repetitions without being on the field, without the troublesome linemen and linebackers trying to get at him, but it gives the option to be able to do that. So that was something we did back in 2008 with our initial work in VR. And then move to the next one. It's a golf simulation product we had a similar time. This one we didn't use an HMD, we kind of used a projection system, but once again you see the full body motion capture. We were tracking the play of the club, getting some ball parameters so we got a hit. And what happened then, we projected on the screen in third person view. He takes the shot, it's able to drop down, and he gets into a first person view which we tied to his head tracking at that point. So as he gets down here, you'll see him look around, he's able to duck down, see behind the bush. But the idea was that he get in more immersive than a standard golf simulator. And we also had another collision menu. He was able to use his golf club to be able to tap his virtual club bag, pick the driver, pick the putter, and do it all interactively, so he wasn't having to worry about someone helping him out. Hey, I'm trying to hit a putter now. So that was also a bit of a legacy application we had going on at one time. In the future, the two areas, performance, as I say, some of this is injury prevention, creating repetitions for players where they don't have to experience the danger of competition, let's say. Increased training reps. You got a third string quarterback who never gets out on the field, but he's able to go into a virtual reality system, be able to train and get his reps and be ready to go in when necessary. Accelerated learning. I didn't get a chance to look too much into a lot of the studies, but there have been some where we look at studies and how you learn in virtual reality and how that helps you train and accelerate your training as opposed to the standard way of training these sports. And then engagement and fan experience. Realism, everybody's mentioned it, I think, so far here. Engaging content, something that's going to bring someone back. The idea of these sports entities, they really want their fans to be a part of their organization. So being able to engage them. Competition, community, Travis mentioned it. Trying to see how do we get a more competitive nature, how do we get a more community nature of people who want to experience these sporting applications that can be as close to the real thing as possible. So that's kind of where some of the future opportunities are going to lie, and hopefully we'll be pushing some of those boundaries too with our work. Shaun.
All right, GGDA. I like the game developer side of that whole equation. So that's where I'm going to start talking. All right, so first, real quick, I wanted to shout out to my team. Adam Massengale. Thanks, buddy. Ryan Kirby. So we're the game development team. So I wanted to talk to you about game development stuff, obviously. So is there anybody out here that is on a game development team of some sort? Anything? Come on. I mean, indie, whatever you're doing, just kind of get an idea. Okay, all right, well, let's say that was 15%. Okay, all right, well, there's some stuff that's coming up that's fairly geared towards you. If we go to the next slide, please. All right, so I want to talk about the present state of some of the game development portions of what we do. So you'll see right here, I've got a representation of CryEngine 3. So the product that you've been seeing out here and that you'll see later on is called Dauntless. The game engine that was used to develop it is CryEngine 3 that's had plenty of custom modifications made to it to integrate very nicely with all this custom in-house technology. And we can do great things with this, and you're going to see that. So let's go to the next slide, because this is where I like to live. I like to get excited about the future. So this is the present, which is extremely exciting, but I want to take it to that next level. And what we've decided to do here at Motion Reality is utilize the Unity game engine. Are there any Unity game developers out here? Tinkerers, whatever. There's a lot of Unity folks in the area, and it's good to see that we've got company. So if you go to the next slide, please. So kind of looking at what some of the things are that made Unity extremely successful. We've got the democratization of game development is a pretty big deal for Unity. If you know anything about Unity, that's a pretty key factor for them and their success and how they've been able to engage and grow their user base. It's something, last time I heard, they're well over 500,000 game developers utilizing Unity, and I'm sure that's well past that at this point. So the influence in the industry, it's not to be taken lightly. If you look at how their implementation of their licensing model has impacted something like Unreal, CryEngine, the model for licensing a game engine of this caliber has changed, and they keep getting better and better. And the asset store is a wonderful example of how they've been able to get their revenue streams up and get a lot of great ideas into the hands of everyone else, and it's very accessible. Someone can develop an add-on or some content that otherwise was inaccessible to them. They just weren't able to get that stuff, and the asset store has really been a wonderful tool for the community. And they're keeping pace with all the VR, all the VR platforms that are coming out, the rendering techniques into their game engine, the optimization, the performance. They're doing some wonderful things. So that I kind of took that and said, how can we apply some of that to what we're doing in the future that we're going? Next slide, please. So what would Brian Boitano do if he had access to all this stuff? And what would you do if you had access to a system like this, all of the technology that we've developed in-house? And you've got some wonderful ideas, I'm sure. You've got some things banging around in your head that maybe you'd like to see come to fruition, but how in the heck would you approach something of this scale, being an independent developer or even an established development community? No one's really able to do what we do. So let's think about opening that up to other folks. And how would we do that? Let's go to the next slide. So we can take a VR volume, a software developer's kit, a marketplace, similar to an asset store kind of concept, And now we've got a big win for everybody who's involved. So I'm not trying to make an announcement today that you can go run out and get an SDK and start developing in Unity and target this. But what I am saying is that the future is very bright, and an announcement like that, may be coming. And what I'm envisioning is volumes like this, where people can go with their buddies and experience a group, thing together and immerse themselves in various spots around the United States and other countries who have, purchased or otherwise entered an agreement with us, and they have a volume available. So now we empower the development communities around the world that can use Unity and our SDKs and have access to all this power and neatness, and be able to put their products up for sale. And the various owners of or the franchisees or whoever they may be that have these volumes can come in and say, hey, I like this. Let's put this out there. So I'm not going to talk to all the different things on this slide, but just the concept in general is very exciting, and there's a lot of growth potential that we're talking about here. So as you go into the volume perhaps yourself and experience it, or you're just spectating, think about those things and where we're going to be able to take this together. Next slide. Okay, so that pretty much wraps up what our process or our standard speaking points were. And we're going to go ahead and open up for some question and response, because it might not be the answer you're looking for. We'll just say we're going to respond. All right, so how are we going to do this? We're ready to take questions here. We're going to pass the mic. All right, so just go ahead and stand up and shoot your question out. And just direct it to anyone that you... Not an illusion.
Okay, good. So the second question is, how do you not bump into somebody who's right below you?
Excellent question. So he's asking about having people on different levels in the virtual world and on the same level in the physical world. That's something that we really do well, and we do support it. It's not an illusion. So the way that works is going up and down stairs, it's one of the more fun parts of the experience. But you're essentially ground clamped, so you walk up to a set of virtual stairs and you just continue to walk either up or down, and that's where your virtual character is going to be. So as you change planes, now stop me if I'm getting into any territory here. So yeah, as you change planes, the other players are aware of where you are in relation to them and vice versa. So we're able to figure out, hey, there's somebody there in the real world that you need to be careful about. So we have a representation of that individual, and our safety briefing is going to contain some of that information. So when you're running out there and you're dead, perhaps you got shot, you'll have that same type of representation of your body, so that it's like a see-through blue holographic, pretty neat little guy. But that says that he's there physically, but not virtually. So that's how you can have, we've got scenarios with multiple 10-story buildings, and you're going through level by level clearing, and you have folks potentially at different levels of the building. Questions? Yes, sir. Oh.
Can you speak a little bit more about the UI design and how using the gun as the main interface, you can switch weapon, reload, all those different things?
Anybody want to take that? I'm glad to take all of them, but I don't want to. So, come on, Travis.
As far as UI, we try to minimize actual software level UI as much as possible. As far as switching weapons, we actually, for the military, we train where someone can have a rifle and then also have a secondary firearm. And the nice thing is, it's actually just a secondary firearm that is actually holstered to your waist. And so the way you switch weapons is you just reach down and grab your pistol and just drop your rifle, and it swings down, and now you've got your pistol. So it's that level of realism is what we're striving to do. Now, we can't do that with everything, and obviously, one of the things that we'll do is if there's a door, in our volume. We might, and you want to open the door, you will have it where you can reach down and touch the doorknob, and then when you touch the doorknob, you'll see a little thing count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, then the door opens. Little tricks like that, where there's little haptic scenarios where if you want to work with something that's purely virtual, then there's a little bit of creativity that you need to do, but you want it to be localized, and you want it to be as far away from a computer menu looking thing as possible, so that the immersion is preserved as much as it can be. And we work really hard to make that happen. I think John talked with a lot about that with even the golf stuff, even as far back as that golf application back in 2006 or 5 or whenever, you were still just using the club head of your golf to kind of reach down and kind of push a little spot that had like a picture of of something on it, and it was you're still using the tool of the game or simulation that you were in to do the job. So stay as far away from computer looking things as possible, stay as close to the real world as you can. That's how we're doing it. Games?
More interfaces, eh? Well, I mean, it depends on the game, right? Sometimes you have to create a game mechanic to match the limitations of your technical environment, and sometimes it's the other way around. You have a game mechanic that you really want to achieve, and you need to make your technology work with you there and fit in. So I'd say user interface, especially in a VR environment, that's a game mechanic. That's something you need to be worried about, and if the game play itself, the scenario that you're building out is a spacesuit, and I've got maybe a reason for a heads-up display, that's a great way to bring in some new elements, and you've got this a new way to engage in your environment. So I'd say it's, in my opinion, I mean, it's really up to the game designers, but we iterate on the fun, and we're a small shop, so we have a lot of input, just like probably a lot of other people out here do. You're in a small team, so we find ways. If it's appropriate, when we need a way to engage further, let's say that we have implemented something in one of our simulators, which is to give the individual the control to fly around and maneuver. Let's say a commander, for instance. He wants to go in and kind of visualize, see how the troops are doing what they're doing. Are you doing the right thing, or do I need to smack you? So you can give them some controls to move either their body or press some user interfaces that are integrated into the environment, I should say, that could allow you to float around. And Adam, yes, sir. Yeah, so these interface elements that you see here, that you see over there, that's specific to this Dauntless product, and it's the person who's sitting at the controller workstation. So they've got a lot more ability to manipulate, and they don't have an HMD on. They're not fully immersed in VR. They're monitoring the VR environment, and they can set up. They're in. It's probably a somewhat unfamiliar term, but basically saying what areas of the map are these people currently running around in. Are there any constraints that he wants to add? Add little things into the scenario that some administrator or controller would do. So those interfaces do not match what you're going to see inside of the screen. It's a completely different experience that's. Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about educational experiences, museum experiences. Have a kid walk around in the virtual bottom of the ocean. Is that possible? Do you need too big a space that it makes it impractical to do that? Can these spaces be portable?
So the question was about the size of the volume that we would need. Can we reduce it down to facilitate different experiences that may be more appropriate on a smaller scale? This can absolutely scale downwards, but there's where do we draw that line of what makes sense? So currently, as far as what we offer officially to Dauntless product owners is 4 different sizes. There's a 1,200 square foot. There's a 2,400 square foot, like this is exactly what we're in here. 5,000 square feet. Well, 4,000 square feet, then 5,000 square feet. However, our tracking development team, they've got a smaller volume in there that they test against. So I'd say that yes, there's scalability, but it really just depends on the application and would it make sense. And there are other.
The golf application you saw was in a 20 by 18 truss size.
Right. So the product itself, like for Dauntless, this is what makes sense. For golf, you can't really necessarily see back there, but it's a much smaller volume, and it makes sense for that particular application. So I think the answer to your question is yes. It can be scaled down for an appropriately targeted audience.
I was wondering about on the sports side. Go ahead and ask in the microphone.
Come, step up. Yeah.
Get on screen. Okay, arrested, never convicted. All right. Now, the other question that I had was when you were talking about the sports and you're showing the football player doing his thing, how big could you get that? Could you get an entire line in that so that you could track them and have them do a play and then be able to replay the virtual reality of it and go, okay, well, you did do the play, but you guys were off in your timing. You didn't hit these marks when I told you to, because you could do some very, very accurate analysis and really tune a play if you could track that.
Indeed.
And have multiple people. So I was wondering what you had to say.
I think that's a great thing. That example came from the American Football Coaches Show, where we went and took a travel system that was a little bit larger than our golf system over there. It was probably a 30-foot by 20-foot area of cameras that we had. We were fortunate at that location. We were able to get them to suspend it, so we didn't even have legs in the way at that point. So that was kind of nice. It felt like a bigger environment. But we set it so that the quarterback could snap, drop back, at least 5-step drop, make the play. But a lot of that, 2008, that was kind of where we were at. We talked a lot at that time saying, hey, can we do 2 or 3? We began to experiment. Can we do a snapper and a kicker? Can we do 2 linemen up against each other? On motion capture-wise, we did. We never put that into the virtual product at that point. It was more a quarterback trainer. But with a lot of the development that's gone on here, and now we're tracking 12 trainees simultaneously in close quarters. Absolutely, those are the kind of things that says, hey, if this makes sense, let's just make it something this size that we're sitting in today, so we can spread 5 linemen across and have them, and we can go back and recreate. And just like I was talking with the soccer recreation of the play, that's effectively what we're doing then, and it's part of a training. So yes, absolutely, a lot of the development has gone into making multiple player. Dauntless can certainly be applied back to a sports application for that. So,
all right. Good news, bad news. Good news is we're going to get to the volume soon. Bad news is we're only going to take one more question. And there's some more good news. You can still talk to us offline after that gets going, but we're going to take one more question, and then we're going to get into a safety briefing. Our production team will kick that off for any of the folks who are going to get into the volume. So let's get one more really good question in. All right, we'll go from chat. Yes.
The question from chat. What are the main differences between creating assets, primarily art assets, for VR versus console or PR games, or PC games?
Art asset creation.
Come on.
Come on up.
Step up.
Yay. We got DJ coming down. DJ is the lead game artist.
The biggest hurdle we have is the game engines like to boast huge shaders, huge poly counts, things like that. For the most part, we are trying to gauge our frame rate before it gets passed into the volume at 120 hertz. Because we have to account for stereo and the latency that's already inherent in the system. So the shaders are limited. We try to keep our draw calls down. All the normal tricks of unwrapping, vertex counts, things like that. They still do matter. It's my turn.
No, I'm gonna hang out with you. So
All right.
a lot of the mobile stuff too. Those mobile tricks of the trade come into play here.
Yeah, I mean, just the general optimization works exactly the same as it is. I mean, for the most part, creating assets is identical. That's the good news. The downside is the really big shaders that you'll get out of the packages, or I mean, like familiar with the Atom demo, Blacksmith demo out of Unity. We haven't tried those. Those are things that we are going to test just to see how bad they bog down the system. But those are pre-rendered. Those are laptop types of things. But theoretically, we should be able to push that. And better HMDs, better, backpacks that can push it. We keep going.
Excellent. All right, so with that, we're going to go into a safety briefing and just kind of a prep for anyone who's going to get into the volume today. And we'll be selecting these names here in a moment. But we've got our production team lead who runs the system out there, Tanner.
Hey. How do you bring this down? So today we're all going to be playing on one level surface. There aren't going to be any stairs to keep the throughput high. And as far as safety goes, there's going to be an orange boundary to keep you from walking out of the volume, to keep tracking on track. And once you die, there will be a ghost mesh that appears. It'll be a blue person to signify where everybody's physical body is in relation to where their virtual body was when they were alive. And it'll be easier to see while you're in the scenario. It's just once you get in, you'll recognize it. And we'll have one of our guys going through it with y'all, so it'll be easy to figure out. I'm ready. Yeah. So we're about to take groups of 4 at a time. I'll call out who I'm going to be taking first, and we'll get y'all suited up and into scenarios. I got them right there. The first 4 are already in. There you go. All right, so yeah.